I'm Nikola Blanchard, and this work is mostly done with Ted Selker, and I'll try to give a summary of the few different things we did to get the scourge under control somewhat. So, I mean, the basic assumptions are extremely simple. It's basically that passwords are bad. And we are all using them, and some people around here, I think, well, supposedly, are trying to change that and get other things instead of passwords to log into systems. Now, to just see the size of this monster we're dealing with, average user, like recent studies have shown, they have 100 accounts. That's way more than your parents for. But the funny thing is, actually, that if you ask them how many they have, initially they say, I might have 10. And they ask them, list them. And how many social media, how many things. And then they realize that their own estimates are very wrong. Similarly, for the creation rate, we get about 15 new passwords per year. I mean, this is UK data, but there's no reason to think it's really different from here. And you mentioned it. We are all familiar with the counterproductive constraints. There's actually very important work by Laurie Craner and a few others to try to reverse that trend, because I think if not for her, by now we would have actually Google asking us to put Sumerian characters in our passwords. Now, the problem with any constraint system is that you say, give me a number, give me a special character, and naturally people do one at my password, and it actually sometimes reduces the average complexity. So that's the state of password use, and because of that, everyone reuses the same password all the time. 75% of people reuse even the strongest ones. People share them all the time. 40% of users do. And they lose them all the time. Actually, that's very annoying data that people, if you ask them whether they had to reset their main personal email password in the past 3 months, about 40% say yes. For the bank account, it's always between 40 and 60% for email, banking, and professional passwords. And the thing is, those are independent. So, like, on average, a user has reset 1.5 passwords over the past 3 months of their 3-4 main passwords. So this, once again, is UK data. So we have a very big scourge. Now, we have other authentication methods. We mentioned earlier biometrics. And one big problem with that is that, well, for the real, like, traditional biometrics, fingerprints, face, iris, so far every major development, every system that was deployed has been hacked, or a vulnerability has been found within the first 6 months. And the problem is, if someone steals your password, create another account, create another password. Changing your iris is slightly more bothersome. Now, biometrics is, non-behavioral biometrics are complicated because they're easily hackable so far and dangerous long-term. Behavioral biometrics are interesting, but still not widely used. So let's just forget about biometrics for now because not mature enough. Other possibility, use Facebook, use Google, use all your neighbors right there. Just give a key to your neighbor, which is fine if it's one neighbor. If your neighbor has the key to 300 million people, you might start to worry about their power. Now, I don't like trusting Facebook with all my passwords. That depends on you, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that you might not want to do that all the time. Physical devices. The oldest hack used to be, if I wanted to hack whatever computer was here, I would look in the first drawer, find a post-it, find the password. 49% of people still store some passwords on the post-it. Physical devices like secure USBs. are better, but still, you're dependent on a small device that you can lose, that can be stolen, whatever. And password managers, well, they are two types. Either they're online, LastPass, OnePass, whatever, and well, on average, one big one gets hacked every year, so I'm sure your passwords are secure. And the other possibility is they're offline, and I'm sure you never had your laptop stolen or destroyed and then lost all access to any account. So all those alternative methods are there, and they all have flaws. And password reuse is what a lot of us are doing and has flaws, but just had to mention it. OK, so what else? What are the things we can do? We can put a salt. A lot of people are doing this right now. Just remember a complex string of characters and just vary the last few. That was OK till now. There are attacks that are starting to target those kind of passwords because they're generally low entropy once you know the salt. So if I manage to get your salt, or like one or twice, then I figure out all your other passwords. There is, very interestingly, an algorithm developed recently by Manuel Bloom. Now, it seems he was the first one to really think about this thing and say, hey, how can I make an algorithm where I don't need any physical device, I don't need to trust anyone else, I just use my brain, and I don't have to remember 100 different passwords. So I'll just use some data, some information, local information, global information, and make that into a password system that I can execute in my own brain. Now, that is groundbreaking. There's just a simple problem with the method, which is that Bloom tested it on himself and said, I can make it work, it works. And so I tried, and I actually can't get it. Like, I have trouble understanding the algorithm, and I spent time on it. So I'm thinking, having the standard for an algorithm that is for public use be a Turing Award winner can probably execute it in his head. That might not be the right standard we want. I mean, excellent work, just not for us mortals. So there's a last possibility, which is full of promise, which is passphrases. Passphrases are just very long passwords, and people can remember them very well. And the problem is, if your password is 40 characters long, most websites won't accept that. And like, you have, like, they're slow to type. So the end result is, oh, that was not supposed to be there, sorry. But the end result is that we're stuck with passwords, and that, well, passphrases, yeah, that's just, you probably saw this comic before on the strength of passphrases versus passwords. It's, like just using natural language, using our natural ability to remember concept, objects, associate them, is better than our ability to remember small variations on a simple word. The end thing is that we're stuck with passwords for at least a while, it seems. So how do we do that? How do we manage the scourge while being stuck with the scourge? Well, with Ted there, we decided to try to see if we could improve on Bloom's work. And we thought, there are constraints for that. What are the constraints? We want the passwords to be secure. That seems, that's why you have passwords. High entropy and just like entropy, min entropy, like using the right metrics for this, your password should resist attacks. Not only as a password, but also as a set of passwords. So if I manage to steal one of your passwords or two of your passwords, I should still not easily get into your other accounts. That's the first thing. Second thing is, you should not forget them. You should have one method, simple method, and it should be enough that if I create a password today, use the method for other passwords, but need my password in 3 years, it should be durable. I should not have lost everything. Yeah, the next constraint is a bit targeted, but it should be easy to understand. And the last thing is it should be compatible with frequent constraints. If someone asks you to put a Sumerian character, you should be able to put a Sumerian character without changing your algorithm. Because otherwise, what happens is that you say, well, I've got this algorithm, and just in case there's that, I have this algorithm. And then instead of having 100 passwords, you have 100 password algorithms, which are arguably less efficient. OK, we have constraints. Now, what do we do with them? We create a big secret, and we extract entropy. We try to just extract entropy in the form of letters, because letters are something that humans are relatively good at. And what's a large secret that people can remember easily? A sentence. So just use words and use small operation on words to create a password from a sentence. OK, from a high-level view, that's what you need. You need one passphrase. High entropy, we're generally talking at least 6 words. 8 is best, and like it's also like, what kind of words, but I'll get to that in the second half of this talk. So one passphrase and one 4-digit PIN. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's much better to have a 4-digit PIN. For people with number problems, there's actually a way out. But let's focus on this for now. So that is the main secret you have. It's one sentence and a number, 4-digit number. Should be enough to remember if it's the only thing you use. Easier to remember than like already 3-4 passwords. OK, but that is the global information. You need local information. Otherwise, any password you create will be always the same or will be random. And so you need local information. And the local information is what? It's a 4-letter queue for each website. For example, it could be Facebook. I could use face. I could use book. I could use FCBK. I choose. But it should be as easy as possible. The goal is not making it secure. The goal is just making it rememberable. And, well, once we have this global information and this local information, run a simple algorithm that extracts digits, well, letters, from the sentence using the local information and the PIN. Seems simple enough. I will start by showing you an example, because it's always better with an example. And this is the example. So it's called Cue-Pin-Select. So does this work? It works a bit. OK, so this is actually the whole algorithm, whole execution. What do I have? I have my sentence. My sentence here is parallel, ordinary, berry, disastrous, divergent, water. Just randomly chosen words in a dictionary. And I have my PIN, 6980. That is just simple PIN, simple sentence. And I want to create a password for Amazon. So what do? I create a queue, AMZN. So far, it's fine. And I do the first step. The first step is called queue. I look for the first letter of my queue in the sentence. So I get to the first A. Then it's called PIN. I take the first digit of my PIN, and I go 6 letters further. PA, so RAL, LEL, I stop at L. Select, I select the next 3 letters, I write them down. And now we're here, and I look for an M. I restart the process, Cue-Pin-Select, Cue-Pin-Select. Problem is there isn't any M in the sentence. What do? I look for the N, next letter in the alphabet. But I don't start from here, I start from there. I find the N, I go 9 letters further, and I write the next 3. OK, then I continue. But this time, I reach the end, and I cycle. And we just do this. You do this 4 times, as the name of the algorithm says. Just Q, you find the letter. Pin, you go N letters forward. Select, you write the next 3, and you start from where you stopped. OK, the algorithm is there. It's a bit ugly, but it basically just says what I said. At least 6 random words, random digits, service name, and this is just executing the thing. You run the algorithm, repeat it 4 times, finding the letter. If the letter is not in there, you find the next one in the alphabet, and so on. Until you find the letter, you go forward, cycling over, and you get the next 3 letters. OK, this is Cue-Pin-Select. Now, it's maybe understandable, but is it secure? Is it usable? Let's see. Security-wise, well, first good thing is brute forcing it is hard. Standard, I've heard different numbers, but it's generally 36 to 42 bits from what I've heard, because online setting means you get limited amount of tries per second. So actually the work by Bloom is actually assuming way lower numbers because services tend to block you way earlier than that. But still, 36, 42 bits should be good enough. And if you just naively brute force it, like the whole password space is technically any 12-character password with English letters, so it's 56 bits. Now, weirdly enough, if you optimize it, depending on the distribution of trigrams in the English corpus, you only lose 4 bits, which was a surprise. Like it's actually quite uniform. And so attacking the password, brute force-wise, we're high above the security thresholds. Attacking the passphrase, well, the average length makes it just impossible. But even dictionary attacks, 6 words, each has more than 10, 15 bits of entropy, you're safe, assuming the adversary doesn't have additional information. OK, so no brute force. What about clear text attacks? Because that's the thing I wanted to fight, right? You don't want someone just with no information on you to be unable to attack. You also want someone who steals some of your passwords. And the problem is that it's quite hard to analyze, because if we make that, then the adversary who has one clear text must make lots of assumptions on the distribution. So let's just assume an extremely strong adversary who, instead of knowing one clear text, which is 4 trigrams that are present in your passphrase, instead they know where the trigrams are. So they know the length and they know the position. And this is actually very powerful for the adversary because there is ambiguity. The 4th trigram we can actually show, you don't know whether it's before or after the 3rd trigram in a sentence. Like the probability distribution is the same. Generally, the 2nd is after the 1st, so you know that the relative positions of both. But the 3rd and the 4th, you have no idea where they are. Like this distribution goes all over the place. So the adversary knows a lot of additional information. Now, how can they do it with this information? Well, that is actually residual entropy, empirically speaking. So we considered an adversary with all this information, just randomly create a passphrase, randomly create a password, give the password to the adversary, and check, OK, on the remaining passphrases, how many are compatible with this password? And so attacking the passphrase using the password. And the answer is, well, generally 50 bits. So generally, with one clear text password and additional information, you still have more security than someone could try online. There's actually very low probability of getting over 40 bits. Like it was something like 3 people out of 10,000. And I'll get to that. It's just anomalous behavior. But the question also is, why am I saying attacking the passphrase? Because what you want is attacking the password. It turns out that if you take a password generated with this algorithm, and you take another password generated using this algorithm, well, assuming one is the real password, the distribution on the other really looks like the initial distribution. The passwords are generally independent. You can get maybe 2 bits of information using one password to get another. So using a clear text password to attack another clear text password doesn't work. Using it to attack the passphrase is a much more general attack. that is promising, but that actually doesn't really work in practice. Like this is best case scenario for the attacker. Okay, but that is one clear text password. What happens with 2? And with 2 and with 3, we can see that actually there's a risk. Well, there is a risk there. There are a few people, there's actually one person whose password was entirely guessable from 3 revealed clear texts. Now, can anyone guess why that is? Why someone's password could be entirely guessable using 3 clear texts? The passphrase.
Repeating words?
No, but what?
Repeating letters. Lots of the same letter.
It was actually not that. It was very, very stupid. Well, each time you reveal a clear text password, you reveal 12 letters, right? So if you're lucky, you reveal 24 letters with 2 clear text, 36 with 3, assuming you're very lucky. Now, some of the passwords generated, some of the passphrases, were less than 36 letters. So if you're extremely lucky and you know the position of all of this, which is what a normal adversary shouldn't know, but our strong adversary knows, well, they just have the whole sentence already shown. But normally, there should be lots of ambiguity on where the trigrams are. So this is really a worst case analysis. And so this worst case analysis shows that on average, 2 plain text attacks, you're still left with more than 20 bits. So an adversary has to try around 1 million different passphrases to get your thing, assuming they know all that. Okay, let's just go to just summarize a little bit, I think. Oh, wait, no. There's usability. I did promise usability. We tried it. We actually got 12 people to try it over 4 days. So it would be nice to have more, but asking people to actually use an algorithm multiple times a day for a while is hard on the users. So the thing is, initially, people struggled with it. I mean, initially, like the first 2 passwords they generated, they made mistakes, and the record was actually nearly 4 minutes to create 1 password. That's not acceptable. And we told them, you can use anything you want. You can use a pen and paper. You can do whatever. Just here you create a passphrase, you create a password. How much time do you need? And it was like 82 seconds. Now, the fun thing is, after 2 days, using basically creating 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, so not crazy intensive training, 2 days sped up by 100%, down to 42 seconds average. And median is the same. And then we decided to get naughty with them and say, you can't use pen and paper anymore. You have to do everything in your head. And, well, once again, everyone struggles and goes back up, some like more than 3 minutes. And then, over the next day, go back down. And everyone actually, in the end, managed to get a password entirely in their head under 60 seconds. And down to 24 seconds. So someone actually managed to get quite fast. Those people made less than 16 different passwords. So that's still limited training, and they got faster. Now the problem is, some still took a long time. And when we asked them, would you use this? Some were like, it's just a bit too expensive. So that's something you got to work on. But it already is doable. I mean, with a bit of training, everyone could get under 45 seconds and get passwords that are, as I showed, secure. There are a few things to be said, though, which is that it doesn't follow all the constraints. It doesn't allow for a number of special characters or length constraints or frequent changes. Now, the good thing is that you can actually handle all of this very, very easily. You just decide once and for all, I'm going to use 1 as my number and, like, I don't know, pound as my special character. Put it in the middle of your password. And sure, it doesn't add any security, but it makes it follow the constraints. And it's deterministic. So you always create the same. Now, length constraints, if you want it to be longer, you can just add whatever you want at the end, as long as it's always the same thing. You can run 1 more round of Cue-Pin-Select. And if it's the other way around, well, you should be a bit worried. I know my bank doesn't allow passwords for more than 6 characters, and I don't use online banking a lot as a consequence. So, there are risks with that, but it basically depends on the service. If the service you're using is fundamentally unsecure, you can't make a secure password for it. The last thing is frequent changes, and you can address this quite easily too by just changing the queue. So let's say I start with Facebook, like queue for Facebook will be face, and I say, okay, I need to change it every 3 months because I work at Facebook and they ask me to change my password frequently. Like I don't work for Facebook. But let's say they do that. Well, I say, okay, I'll just add 1 to the queue every 3 months. So for example, instead of Facebook, I'll just say GBCE instead of FACE. I'll just increase the letters by 1. And that's actually enough to change your whole password entirely. If you're lucky, changing 1 character, the first character, changes the rest of the password entirely. And if you're unlucky, you need 2. So frequent changes, length constraints, number and special characters, we can handle. That's the good news. So what's left? Well, I just showed you something, which is 52-bit security passwords, guaranteed resistance against a single clear text attack, probable resistance against up to 3. You can create lots of passwords with this. Like I actually ran some things before having like passwords that were too similar. You can at least have 500. And if you're a bit careful with how you design your queues, basically, yeah, just being a bit careful, not making 2 queues that are identical, then you're okay. And quick learning process. According to the models, which same models as everyone else uses, everyone should remember this. And we actually tested it by not showing the users their sentence again. And we were expecting a few to forget, which happens. And actually, on the second day, a single user forgot a single word. So like they memorized the sentence entirely on the first day. Well, except 1 user. So like more memorable than we thought. Natural extension to handle frequent constraints. There's another extension to improve security, to make it like more durable in the future, if we want. But that's it. There's a problem. Well, not a problem, but one thing I didn't mention, which is the passphrase. And that's the second part. How do we choose a passphrase? If your passphrase is to be or not to be, that is the question, then any password you create, no matter the algorithm, will be insecure. And there's a reason I chose to be or not to be, that is the question, because there was recently a study on that, where they asked people to create passphrases and like remember them and use them. And in one study of about 1,000 people being asked to just create something, 2.54 or 53% of the users chose that one. And even in studies where they asked people, please do something that is relevant to you and that no one else does, and like make it personal and everything, people still used famous sentences, quotes from books, whatever. There was not a single study. So there was a single study where people did not have, they did not get a collision between 2 users on choosing a sentence. And those were long sentences. And the single study that did, actually at least one person had to be or not to be, but they were the only one who got it, so that was fine. And another one found another quote, but they were the only one. So people were a bit more distributed, but you still had a lot of the sentences that were present in the other studies. It just had too few people to actually check it out. So how do we choose a passphrase? Well, I said first possibility, choose them. Oh, it was 2.55. I was off by 0.01%. People choose that. They choose sentences from the literature. Actually, you can show that even if you take a sentence uniformly written from, like, chosen from any book created in the history of mankind, it's still low entropy. Like, people really overestimate the amount of, but come on, this author is obscure. No, like, it's present, it's on the internet, it's too late. Unless it's your written manuscript, but that is unpublished, it's not safe. So if we let people choose them, people choose them very badly. Even when you try to push them, to prime them into getting stuff that is secure. Well, what if you impose them randomly? Well, we all remember randomly imposed passwords, and those work very well. So memorability-wise, it doesn't work. We all forget them. And there's another thing, which is if you have a 6-word sentence, and you want people to remember it, if there are words in the sentence that the people don't know, then they probably will have a lot of trouble. So if you want to use a big dictionary, you have a high probability of getting a rare word in it, and the people won't know it, and so you can't use a large dictionary. So actually, if you have a random generation, you're more or less forced to either have strong memory problems or very hard memory issues. So we decided, well, what if we try to take the best of both worlds? And the idea is very simple. You take a list of words that is randomly generated, and you ask people to choose from it. It's as simple as that. You show them, we did that, just 2 groups to check it out a bit, 20 to 100 words, like 20 and or 100 words. They had to pick and remember 6. And we were wondering, what made them choose those words, and how does that affect entropy of the sentences generated? And what kind of mistakes they make, and does that actually help the memorization? Because if we want to use that method to create passphrases, it better help the entropy, and it better help the memory. Otherwise, it's all for naught. Well, the protocol was very simple. Showed them the list of words from a large dictionary. This dictionary was actually, we took the 100,000 most frequent words in like Google Ngrams, and we restricted it to actual English words. So it's still like 86,713, if I'm correct. Around that anyway. Okay, we asked to choose 6 words, or for a control group, we imposed them. Just give them the 6 words generated in the same way. Ask them to type it so that they remember it, show them the sentence again, ask them to memorize it, do a few exercises to make sure they memorize it. And then, well, that would be too easy. It's still fresh in their memory. So, I mean, we're not testing any kind of long-term memory. We're just testing short-term memory. So let's distract them. And to distract them, we actually had a fun task, which was show them the list of words that another user had. And they were trying to guess which words the other one chose. Because that actually did 2 things in one. The first is that it distracted them. They were looking at lots of other words, probably forgetting their own. But the second is, maybe there was a method behind how users chose their words, a method we were blind to. Maybe there was a single algorithm that everyone used and we just worked differently or couldn't think of. We're thinking, maybe if someone repeatedly manages to guess all the words the other people choose, the method is bad. So just ask people to guess and see if they do anything better than uniform, like random luck. And then we ask them to write their initial sentence again. And if they fail, we ask them to write it while giving them their initial list of words, just to see if that helps. So the thing is also that, yeah, the distractor they could do multiple times. So they could spend a while on it. And what happens with that? Oh, this is the sentence. Like, this is an example. It's a bit big. This is the 100-word list. And you see, there's everything. There's a chapbook, there's a planetesimal, and there's off. You really have words of all complexities. Now, what were we expecting? We were expecting people to choose words they were more familiar with. I mean, I'm guessing that if you have to choose words in there, you might take hazards. That's a nice word. You might take coach. You might not want to take pyrophosphate or apolipoproteins. Why not? Some of you might. But you might still be slightly biased in favor of frequent words, or words you're familiar with. Then, there are three main ways that people could choose. A, uniform. That's great. People choose words uniformly, blindly. They don't care about the semantic value. They don't care about the syntactic value. They just take every word with equal probability, and we have all the entropy we could want, and that is really not realistic. Other thing, that was the one that we were afraid of. They take the words that are the most frequent. So I only look at the very most frequent word in the list, and I choose them, and that's it. And if I do that, actually the entropy drops. I get nearly no advantage from the method. And the last possibility is quite natural, is say, basically a word's probability to get chosen is proportional to the probability of it being chosen in natural language. Like in a big corpus, basically, if I show you the 100-word list, you take a word in it as frequently as you use it when you speak or when you write. Proportionally speaking, at least. So those are the three methods we could figure out. And let's look at the data first. This is how they chose the words in the 20-word group. So we actually showed them 20 words, and this is for English speakers and foreign language speakers, people who were not native speakers. And we were afraid that all the mass would be in there. That would be bad for us. That would lower the entropy a lot. But it turns out, well, no. Even among the very rare words, like the rarest in the group we give them, they still pick them. And they still pick them at reasonable rates. It's not uniform, but it's pretty good. And what happens if I show them even more words? Well, they have even more choice. They're probably even more biased. It is true, but those are buckets. So basically, this is corresponding to the 20 most frequent words. There's a lot of mass. But if you actually look, about 20% of the words chosen are among the half of the dictionary that is the least used. And this is a big dictionary. So just see the relative thing. One is a bit more biased than the other, but it's not that biased. And what does it mean for the entropy? Well, it means that. It means, that the curves look like this. Now, this was the one, the big pink one, is the one we were afraid of. This is basically, we show you a set of words, and you take the smallest one. You take the most frequent ones. And that would have been very bad, because basically, a method is better if it's closer to a straight line. So this was our worst analysis, our worst hypothesis was smallest 20. We show you 20 words, you take the most frequent ones, and that's not the case at all. But it's actually even better than that, because if we show you the 100 most frequent words, you're not taking them according to the natural language bias, which is the blue curve there. You're taking them according to a much smaller corpus. So if I show you 100 words, what you do is actually you look at 30, and you pick among those 30 according to your natural language bias. And if I show you 20 words, you pick something like 16, 15, and choose among those. Now, what this means is that entropy-wise, it's quite amazing, because here is the summary of the entropies. Uniform over the general whole dictionary is the ideal. We can't do better than that. And it's 16.42 bits. Now, the worst case is the most frequent, like the smallest 100. I take the most frequent words in all the things I've been shown, and I'm at 10.7 bits per word. So there's a big difference. And if I actually let people choose, assuming they choose natural corpus bias, it's actually half the ideal optimal entropy. So you need sentences that are twice as long to get the same amount of security. And now what happens with the different things we tried? Well, our worst guess for how people choose is corpus 30, and we're at 15.92 bits. We're at 98% of the entropy of uniform choice while letting people choose. So we take a 2% dip in entropy. The question is it worth it memory-wise? People are nearly as secure, but is it worth it? And that's the thing. La, 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 la. Those are the mistakes. So 2 sections. The first time we asked them, and the second time we showed them the list of words, except to the control who didn't have a list of words. Now, only about half the people got it right in the 100-word group. But most of the mistakes actually came from making a typo, pluralizing a word, adding an ing, or that kind of thing. There were a few who forgot 1, 2, 3 words. But if you look at the error rate, it's quite fun. The number of forgotten words goes from 16 to 31 between the 100-word group and the control group. The control group is actually half the size. So the rate at which people forget words is 4 times. The rate at which people mistake the order of words is 6 times higher. The make variants is 4 times higher. Wrong words, like just something that has no relationship, once again, 6 times higher. So the effect on memory is actually quite present. Now, arguably, this is quite short-term memory, but there is a distractor task to make it harder. And like the effect is on the control group. There is another thing that I must say, which is, the control group spent less time. They spent less time looking at words, less time making their sentences. Of course, they're going to be worse at remembering them. But actually, if we look within the 2 other groups, the people who spent longer on it didn't get any better. There is no correlation between time spent making the sentence and the errors made. And that was weird, but it actually shows that the control group, the difference in memorization, might be relevant. Well, seems very relevant, because if the time taken does not affect it, then the argument that the control group is disadvantaged does not hold. So, okay, we've got better memorization and better entropy on choosing which words. But what about the structure of the sentence? I mean, we showed semantic effects, but not syntactic effects. Because maybe everyone is doing word, adjective, verb, adverb, noun, adjective. And that reduces the entropy quite a lot, once again. So, just looking at this, what happens? And the thing is, people don't really tend to make meaningful sentences. A few really made very meaningful sentences, quite fun ones at that. But on average, about 50%, we couldn't find any meaning, any global meaning. But the thing is that the structures they used, like the organization, noun, adverb, verb, 65 of the 99 sentences, passphrases made, were unique. And 65 were unique even according to very, very limited things. So to determine the uniqueness, we only had 4 categories: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And like the others, we counted as like okay for everything. So if we were not sure about one word's value, we just counted it for everything. So this is actually a low order, like a lower bound. And there was a single structure that was present more than 3 times, and that was all nouns. And that could be annoying, but actually, you see, this is the distribution. There's just one bias towards having more verbs in the central position. That's the only bias we could see. And the bias that, of course, nouns are much more frequent. But when you actually look at the fact that nouns form about 60% of the English dictionary, the fact that about 60% of the words chosen are nouns is okay, and the fact that some people choose all nouns is still okay because it's the most, like the biggest category, so it doesn't really reduce the entropy by that much. And it's still, not even 10% of people who did that. Okay, so I've got these methods. People get 98% of the entropy at least. They get better memorability, and it seems that syntactically speaking, they're fine. Okay, and we're a bit early, but that's fine. So to conclude, well, okay, 97 to 98. Actually, 20-word list gets 99%, but it has lower memorization gains, so let's not use that. But there's something else. We can use a bigger dictionary. And that's the thing. Like, that's actually there. If I use a uniform over 10,000 words, a lot of online dictionaries that give you random words have between 5 and 10,000. And estimates on the size of our vocabulary vary, but they vary, but still from 20,000 onwards, you start having words that you don't know. Not all of them, but still some. So if you use a uniform sampling over a limited dictionary, you get 13.3 bits per word. If you let people choose from a limited set, you get 16. So you can actually gain entropy by letting people choose, because letting them choose over a bigger dictionary more than compensates for the fact that they are biased. That's the thing. Their bias is way lower than the gains. Okay, so it's memorable and it's lightweight. The whole thing can hold in less than a megabyte, which is still a lot, but I mean, you can run it in the browser. And the main reason why you want to do that is that you want the word list to be generated by the user locally. So like you can download it on your telephone, you can just put it in your browser, whatever. It's small enough that it's a lightweight tool. And okay, so this is just very simple tool to create passphrases of high quality. And there are a few questions on what you can do with it, which is, for example, what's the optimal number? 100 is a lot. People might be a bit just anxious to see that many words and might be paralyzed. So maybe you could have a bit less. Is it interesting to take bigger dictionaries? So we used a dictionary that's like a third of the most frequent third of the English language. We could get, about 2 more bits of entropy if we increased it. But is it worth it? I don't know. And that is actually quite a fun thing, which is some languages have really smaller vocabularies than English, like about an order of magnitude less. And in this case, Cue-Pin-Select and the passphrase choice become more complex because Esperanto has got a small vocabulary. You might not want to use passphrases in Esperanto. There are few people who speak only Esperanto, so that's still okay. And like one fun question, which is how do people choose their words? We can show that it's not according to semantic bias. Well, not very much so. We looked at positional bias, where on the page they choose their words. Turns out it's not really that. There's a small bias for the ones closer to where they type, small bias for the first line, but that's it. It's like barely noticeable, like 10% higher than the average. And well, we did some other work in this direction. We actually just found a typo-tolerant password, which is quite weird because you want the hash to be compatible. There's very good work on that by Chatterjee on like, do you want to correct typos on your password automatically? And if so, how do you do it? And there's outcomes of this work, like codes that are culturally neutral, passwords that are culturally neutral. Because when it comes to e-voting, you don't want one part of the population having a higher error rate than the rest. But there is some research that I'm quite excited to do, and it's a better attack model for Cue-Pin-Select because our adversary is extremely strong because we have the assumption that they know where the bits are, and any weaker thing, it might not be universal enough to compensate for all adversaries. But the big thing is, we want, like that's the main work we're trying to do right now, which is Cue-Pin-Select is still expensive. Some people take nearly 60 seconds, even though the average is lower. And we would like to make it popular, like in the sense that anyone can use it. But for that, we probably need to hit the 30-second barrier. If I give you a password algorithm that you can use in 30 seconds, you might use it. If I say 60 seconds, it becomes costly. And the thing is, anytime you modify the algorithm for Cue-Pin-Select, you don't know how it will behave. You know how it will behave on the security-wise. That's a simple analysis. But you don't know whether people will manage to do it. So how do we create alternatives? Well, the first bad news is that all the local area around Cue-Pin-Select is dead. If you add more words, add more letters, choose 4 groups of 3 or 4 or 3 groups of 4, every time either the usability drops or the security drops so much that you're dead. That like you get 10 bits of security against the clear text, and that's it. So how do we find better alternatives to Cue-Pin-Select? Well, the best way, well, one way would be to have a lot of money and run thousands of user experiments, which would be nice. That's not what we do. So the other way is, well, can we actually get a cost model for all those operations? Because, I mean, if we want 30 seconds, you don't have time for many operations. All your algorithms will be very simple. And, well, as always, Bloom got there first. But I actually don't really like Manuel Bloom's assumptions, because he said that basically taking the 17th letter in the alphabet takes about as much time as the first. Experimentally, that's not true. If I asked people here to get the 17th letter, they would take about probably twice as much time as if I asked for the 8th letter, and quite a lot more than for the first. So there's a dimension of automatic learning and just proper, like, proximate algorithms. So what we're doing right now is, actually, we've got an experiment launched where we are asking people to do lots of small operations in different orders to figure out which ones are costly, which ones are free. Can we use modulo? Can we use small multiplication? Can we use all this? And hopefully we can give lower bounds for mental algorithms. And really, hopefully, the lower bounds are low enough that we can use that to create a better alternative. Well, thank you. And that's it.